season of the year. Otherwise he would have gone ashore now. He loved the river, had faith in it, but he knew that not until the deep forest swallowed them, as a vast ocean swallows a ship, would they be beyond the peril that threatened them from the landing. 3 or 4 times between sunrise and noon they saw life ashore and on the stream. Once a scow tied to a tree, then an Indian camp, and twice trappers' shacks built in the edge of little clearings. With the beginning of afternoon Kent felt growing within him something that was not altogether eagerness. It was at times a disturbing emotion, a foreshadowing of evil, a warning for him to be on his guard. He used the sweep more to help their progress in the current, and he began to measure time and distance with painstaking care. He recognized many landmarks. By 4 o'clock, or 5 at the latest, they would strike the head of the chute. 10 minutes of its thrilling passage and he would work the scow into the concealment he had in mind ashore, and no longer would he fear the arm of the law that reached out from the landing. As he planned, he listened. From noon on he never ceased to listen for that distant put, put, put that would give them a mile's warning of the approach of the patrol launch. He did not keep his plans to himself. Marette sensed his growing uneasiness, and he made her a partner of his thoughts. "If we hear the patrol before we reach the chute, we'll still have time to run ashore," he assured her. "And they won't catch us. We'll be harder to find than 2 needles in a haystack, but it's best to be prepared." So he brought out his pack and Marette's smaller bundle, and laid his rifle and pistol holster across them. It was 3 o'clock when the character of the river began to change, and Kent smiled happily. They were entering upon swifter waters. There were places where the channel narrowed, and they sped through rapids. Only where unbroken straight waters stretched out ahead of them did Kent give his arms a rest at the sweep. And through most of the straight water he added to the speed of the scow. Marette helped him. In him the exquisite thrill of watching her slender, glorious body as it worked with his own never grew old. She laughed at him over the big oar between them. The wind and sun played riot in her hair. Her parted lips were rose red, her cheeks flushed, her eyes like sun-warmed rock violets. More than once, in the thrill of that afternoon flight, as he looked at the marvelous beauty of her, he asked himself if it could be anything but a dream. And more than once he laughed joyously, and paused in his swinging of the sweep, and proved that it was real and true. And Kent thanked God and worked harder. Once, a long time ago, Marette told him, she had been through the chute. It had horrified her then. She remembered it as a sort of death monster, roaring for its victims. As they drew nearer to it, Kent told her more about it. Only now and then was a life lost there now, he said. At the mouth of the chute there was a great knife-like rock, like a dragon's tooth, that cut the chute into 2 roaring channels. If a scow kept to the left-hand channel, it was safe. There would be a mighty roaring and thundering as it swept on its passage, but that roaring of the chute, he told her, was like the barking of a harmless dog. Only when a scow became unmanageable, or hit the dragon's tooth, or made the right-hand channel instead of the left, was there tragedy. There was that delightful little note of laughter in Marette's throat when Kent told her that. "You mean, Jeems, that if one of the 3 possible things doesn't happen, we'll get through safely?" "None of them is possible with us," he corrected himself quickly. "We've a tight little scow, we're not going to hit the rock, and we'll make the left-hand channel so smoothly you won't know when it happens." He smiled at her with splendid confidence. "I've been through it 100 times," he said. He listened. Then, suddenly, he drew out his watch. It was 4:15. Marette's ears caught what he heard. In the air was a low, trembling murmur. It was growing slowly, but steadily. He nodded when she looked at him, the question in her eyes. "The rapids at the head of the chute!" he cried, his voice vibrant with joy. "We've beat them out! We're safe!" They swung around a bend, and the white spume of the rapids lay half a mile ahead of them. The current began to race with them now. Kent put his whole weight on the sweep to keep the scow in mid-channel. "We're safe," he repeated. "Do you understand, Marette? We're safe!" He was speaking the words for which she had waited, was telling her that at last the hour had come when she could keep her promise to him. The words, as he gave them voice, thrilled him. He felt like shouting them. And then all at once he saw the change that had come into her face. Her wide, startled eyes were not looking at him, but beyond. She was looking back in the direction from which they had come, and even as she stared, her face grew white. "Listen!" She was tense, rigid. He turned his head. And in that moment it came to him above the growing murmur of the river, the put, put, put of the police patrol boat from Athabasca Landing. A deep breath came from between his lips. When Marette took her eyes from the river and looked at him, his face was like carven rock. He was staring dead ahead. "We can't make the chute," he said, his voice sounding hard and unreal to her. "If we do, they'll be up with us before we can land at the other end. We must let this current drive us ashore now." As he made his decision, he put the strength of his body into action. He knew there was not the 100th part of a second to lose. The outreaching suction of the rapids was already gripping the scow, and with mighty strokes he fought to work the head of his craft toward the westward shore. With swift understanding, Marette saw the priceless value of a few seconds of time. If they were caught in the stronger swirl of the rapids before the shore was reached, they would be forced to run the chute, and in that event the launch would be upon them before they could make a landing farther on. She sprang to Kent's side and added her own strength in the working of the sweep. Foot by foot and yard by yard the scow made precious westing, and Kent's face lighted up with triumph as he nodded ahead to a timbered point that thrust itself out like a stubby thumb into the river. Beyond that point the rapids were frothing white, and they could see the first black walls of rock that marked the beginning of the chute. "We'll make it," he smiled confidently. "We'll hit that timbered point close inshore. I don't see where the launch can make a landing anywhere within a mile of the chute. And once ashore, we'll make trail about 5 times as fast they can follow it." Marette's face was no longer pale, but flushed with excitement. He caught the white gleam of teeth between her parted lips. Her eyes shone gloriously, and he laughed. "You beautiful little fighter!" he cried exultantly. "You " His words were cut short by a snap that was like the report of a pistol close to his ears. He pitched forward and crashed to the bottom of the scow, Marette's slim body clutched in his arms as he fell. In a flash they were up, and mutely they stared where the sweep had been. The blade of it was gone. Kent was conscious of hearing a little cry from the girl at his side, and then her fingers were gripping tightly again about his thumb. No longer possessed of the power of guidance, the scow swung sideways. It swept past the wooded point. The white maelstrom of the lower rapids seized upon it, and Kent, looking ahead to the black maw of the death trap that was waiting for them, drew Marette close in his arms and held her tight. End of chapter 21. Recording by Roger Moline.